Today I'm going to tell you about an unexpected change to the track plan on my N-scale layout. That's coming right up. Hi, I'm Roy Smith. A few weeks ago I announced a series of big track plan changes to my layout. One of these changes called for a track going from the lift up at the entrance to my train room down to the west end of Echo Canyon. Well, I'm scrapping that idea. It's not going to happen. As I said at the beginning of this series on track plan changes, a track plan is just a tentative guide. It can always be changed. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about that unexpected change to my track plan. But I also want to show you how to modify Kato Unijoiners for use at the lift up. I want to discuss the important issue of track polarity at Pocatello, and I want to briefly describe the routes that trains can take on my layout, as a number of you have been asking me to do. Let me begin by showing you that important change to the track plan. As I said, I was planning to run a track from the lift up down to the west end of Echo Canyon, as you see depicted here by the red track. This track would have allowed me to run two trains simultaneously on the upper level without either of them having to descend out of sight down the helices to staging. But to be honest, I wasn't very happy with the idea of this track connecting to the west end of Echo Canyon, because doing this damaged the integrity of Echo Canyon. A number of you expressed concern about this as well. But in a rare moment of ingenuity, I decided to connect this track to track 1 at Pocatello instead. You see the new track alignment depicted here. I believe this is actually a much better arrangement for layout operations. Remember, from the get-go, Pocatello was meant to be a staging yard. Well, it still is, but by adding the lift-up and tracks across the lift-up, Pocatello has also become a through yard en route to Portland, which is located off layout in staging on the lower level. This run-through is shown here in dark blue, but making this change in the track plan comes at a price. It means I can only run one train, not two trains simultaneously, around and around on the upper level. And it also means I will have to deal with a change in track polarity at Pocatello. I will explain what I mean by that a little later on in this video. Alright, let's take a look at the track work I've done this week. You may recall that I had laid tracks 2 and 3 across the lift-up in last Saturday's episode, but I hadn't glued them down yet at the end of that episode, so I couldn't raise the lift-up yet. Since then I have glued those 2 tracks down. I used white glue to do this. What, you may say, white glue? Why? Well, in the past, I've glued the track to plywood sub-roadbed, and I used hot glue and liquid silicone glue to do this. I applied a dab of hot glue or liquid silicone every foot or two along the edge of the plastic roadbed of the Kato track. This time, though, I'm gluing the track down to pink foam instead of plywood. By using white glue here, it will be easier to remove the track from the foam without destroying the foam if I have to change the track in the future, because white glue is water soluble. As I apply this glue, I am very careful not to put it on the Kato expansion tracks, because those expansion tracks must move freely like this. In order for the expansion tracks to work like this, you have to modify the Kato Unijoiners, or rail joiners as they are called in other brands of track. Normally when you put 2 pieces of Kato track together, you hear a snapping sound like this. This sound is made by the little clips that hold the sections of track together. We need to remove these clips. First, note how the track, on both ends of the cut, approaches the cut but does not overlap it. I begin by removing the unijoiner from the expansion track. Then I put this unijoiner on the track opposite the expansion track, that is, the track that will not be moving. Next, a very important step, I am going to cut off those little clips on each side of both unijoiners. The expansion track now slides open and shut smoothly and easily like this. At this point, I can glue down the last bit of track near the expansion track, but again, not the expansion track itself. You may recall that I didn't install track 1 on the lift-up during last week's episode. Well, I'm going to do it now. But before laying the track, I like to paint the sub-road bed under and along the track a dark gray color. Doing this will help when I apply ballast later on. Yes, I do paint and ballast my Kato track to make it look realistic. But I won't be painting and ballasting the track today. That's normally one of the last things I do in any scene. I want to run trains on the track for a while first to make sure I don't need to make any further adjustments before gluing it down and ballasting it. Okay, now we need to talk about a very serious matter, and that is track polarity. At Pocatello, tracks 3 and 4 have the white rail in front just like the rest of the upper level of the layout. Meanwhile, tracks 1 and 2 have the blue rail in front. Let me explain what I mean by white rail and blue rail. Kato drop feeders come with a blue wire and a white wire. Each of these has to be connected to the same rail all the way around the layout. If you get them reversed, you will have a short on the layout. Tracks 1 and 2 are different because of what happens as the track goes around this curve shown by the blue arrow. So I'm hoping I can solve this issue by installing insulating rail joiners where you see short blue lines at either end of track 1, and by using a Digitrax AR1 automatic reverser on that track. But I really need to hear from you. Will the AR1 solve this issue in track polarity? If not, I will have to take my track plan back to the drawing board. Now the white glue has dried so I can raise the lift up. It's quick and easy, so don't blink or you might miss it. Does all of this mean that I'm done with the track work at the lift-up and at Pocatello? Well, probably not. There are a couple of other things I might try to do. For example, I would like to double-end track 4, which is still stub-ended. I could extend track 4 into this empty space on the lift-up here, and I might even add a 5th track to Pocatello by widening the benchwork by about 2 inches. You'll recall that I was planning to widen the benchwork by 2 inches here when I was thinking about running that track from the lift-up down to the western end of Echo Canyon. Now, as I promised, I briefly want to cover the main routes that trains will take on my layout. I will go into greater detail about this in future videos when I talk about operations on my layout. For now, let me just show you the basic routes on the track plan. This green route shows the route taken by trains between Cheyenne and Ogden, both of which are off layout in staging. This rusty orange shows you the route taken by trains between Portland and Ogden, again, both of which are off layout in staging. Finally, this bright orange route shows you how I can run a train on the upper level without it descending the helices and disappearing out of sight into staging. Sometimes I just want to run a train for fun or for the entertainment of visitors. For now, just remember that my layout is a bridge route. Trains originate in staging, off layout, ascend the helix, cross the upper level of the layout, and then descend the opposite helix back down to staging. This represents the movement of trains between the American Midwest and West Coast. There is very little by way of industrial switching on my layout, but there is lots of classification and interchange operations, and that's just fine by me. Again, I will tell you more about the routes that trains can take on my layout during operations videos in the future. And speaking of the future, be sure to subscribe if you're new here and hit that little bell icon so that you don't miss any of those videos in the future. I'd like to thank you for joining me today to talk about track and routes of track. I got to tell you that I am really anxious to get back to work on White Mountain over here in order to fix the damage I caused there when I opened the top of White Mountain for better access to the helix, and when I realigned the track there to cross the lift up. With any luck, I will be able to start repairing White Mountain this week. And if I do, I will show it to you in next week's episode. Until then, happy railroading. I'm Roy Smith. I will see you again very soon.